Okay. We will continue. We continue. I was explaining about the long necked. Remember, someone who talked about the giraffes first was Lamech. You remember well? For Lamech, he said that we had only short ones. When drought came, those ones which failed to stretch, they had to die. And those ones who had to stretch survived to reproduce. And the stretching went on until we got that one, these ones which are now long with that neck, which can pick up the what? Which can pick up the leaves on the long trees. But for him down, he said no. He said that we had those ones which were short and those ones which were long-necked. All of them, those two varieties existed, the short and the long. But due to drought caused the short grass to die off. After dying off, it means the short ones had nothing to eat. It means they were selected against. They were no longer fit. Are you seeing where the fitness and the fit and the is coming in? The fit and the unfit. Are we together? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, it means here, after the drought came in, the short giraffes were not, they are no longer fit. They were less adapted because the food they were feeding on had to dry up. Then the long ones survived because they could feed on, the trees, the leaves of the trees. Then these young ones, the short-necked giraffes, went under extinction, had to survive, to starve, and had to die of hunger, hence extincted. That's why we are not having giraffes of short necks. They had to extinct because they could not, by that time, they could not survive due to environmental conditions. That's why I told you the environmental conditions can make you become unfit, to the environment. As the environmental conditions go on, we have to get adapted to. You have to move up with the changes. You get adapted, because if you don't get adapted, you will survive. You will not survive. You will go under extinction. Therefore, that is done. That's how they try to explain that. Now, have you picked the theory of down? Yes?
Yes, teacher.
He based his theory on natural selection.
Natural selection.
Natural selection. Someone will say, Master, I have not yet understood natural selection. I told you natural selection. The word selection means those organisms. It is a process where organisms which are better adapted survive to reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation. And those ones which are less adapted will fail to reproduce. They will not reach the reproductive age and they will die. They will not pass on their genes to the next generation. They will not. Like here, the short giraffes failed. They are less adapted. They failed to reproduce and they had to die. That's why we have only long-necked giraffes, because for them they had to survive and reproduce. That was natural selection. But it is the environment. That's why we call it natural. We have other types of selections. As we continue, we are going to look at other types of selections. But this one is called natural selection. We have artificial selection. We have kin selection. Therefore, here we are on natural selection. The environment, the nature selects out. When we say the nature, we mean the environmental conditions. Selects out who to survive and who to die. The one who survives will reproduce and his genes will continue. But those ones which are not adapted will fail to reproduce, hence go under extinction. That is natural selection. We are going to look at it. That was Down. Who stated that? But natural selection will come after variation. Therefore, what comes after the other? Is it natural selection first, then variation, or variation has to be there first, then natural selection? Okay, I'm going to ask you, check what I'm writing. What is the correct order of evolution here? Is it evolution, then natural selection, then evolution? Is everyone seeing what I'm writing? Yes?
Yes.
It is then that is A. B. I want you to give me the right order. Then this one is variation. Sorry, variation. Is it variation, then natural selection, then evolution? Is it natural selection first? C.
No.
Then variation, then evolution? Or is it natural selection first, then evolution, then variation? What is the right answer there? What is the right order of those processes according to what you have understood or what you have picked, according to what I have been explaining?
I think it's B.
It is B.
The
Therefore,
answer is B.
yeah, you're right. Some people have picked what I'm meaning. Therefore, there must be variation on which natural selection will act to bring about variation, to bring about evolution. Therefore, without variation, evolution will not take place, because evolution is due to natural selection. And natural selection will always act on what? Will always act on what? On variation. Therefore, in this case, that's what will happen. Therefore, the process is variation. That's why even in his law, he stated first, he talked about variation first, that in a reproducing population, or in a population, you can say in a population, or someone will say in a sexual reproducing population, there is variation. That's why even in his law, he was clear with the word variation. That word is important. Are we together? Yes?
Yes.
Therefore, in that case, that law, hope people have picked it. Therefore, whenever you're talking about evolution, tomorrow we are going, at the end of this topic, we shall have a chance to discuss very many questions. Someone will ask you, describe the process of evolution. Describe the process of evolution. Describe the process of evolution. It means when you're describing the process of evolution, you will start from there, that in a sexual reproductive population, there is variation. Then you tell me, how does that variation arise? But we have not yet reached there. Because remember, we gave it as a limitation. Although Down told us there is variation, he failed to explain how variation arises. And I don't think that there is someone who has already understood how this variation arises from organisms, which we are going to look at. Now that makes the end of Down's theory of evolution, which he based on natural selection, by telling us that in a population there will always be variation, on which natural selection will act, whereby organisms which are better adapted will survive to reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation, while those ones which are not adapted will be selected against and die. Have you understood that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, modern scientists, when I say modern scientists, this was done just of recent, back in 1964. That is just modern, just not even 100 years have passed. That's the modern theory. Now, when the modern scientists sat, they said Down was 100% right, and he was recognized. He was recognized. He was given a medal. Some people will ask, is he still there? No, it was given to the family members who are still there surviving. Now, when these people sat down, they knew that Down is 100% right. But they looked at the limitations. They said, this man failed to explain how variation arises. The variation, because remember, this Down based his explanation mainly on variation and natural selection. Because variation will come, then natural selection comes. But he failed to establish. Now, these people came with a new theory, which they call the modern theory of evolution, or which they call the Neo-Darwinism theory. Either modern theory of evolution or Neo-Darwinism. In this theory, they included the natural selection of Down because they saw that is right. They included the variation, but in their theory, they added in something. They tried to explain how variation arises, which Down did not do. It means this theory makes you more understand evolution because it will tell you how does variation arise. Are we together? Eh? Are we together? That is what we call Neo-Darwinism.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, this theory for it states that new species of organisms are formed from the pre-existing ones due to, are you hearing that statement I've said? I said what? It's that theory which we call Neo-Darwinism states that new species, that is evolution. When I say new species arise from pre-existing ones, that is evolution. It's like saying that it states that evolution is due to. Are you getting me? Just here I expanded it by saying that it states that new species arise from what? Pre-existing. And you know that one, whenever they say new species arising from pre-existing, that is evolution. Therefore, I may interchange these words, these many words, by putting there only the word evolution, by saying that it states that evolution is due to 1, mutation, 2, crossing over. Do you remember crossing over? Crossing over. Do you remember it?
Yes.
We said it occurs during when? I'm hearing how people are disappearing. When does it occur? Now, let me tell you.
During Prophet's one.
Okay, let me tell you. As you're home there, know it well. If you're to go to the next level, either on a diploma course and any university for bachelors, you must sit your name. Whether now or next year, I'm not concerned about that. It means you people, you need to read. Right now, I would expect members to have gone through all that work previously. I'm always on WhatsApp 24/7, but no one has ever asked me any question. I'm always there, seeing people texting, how are you? People putting on pics, calling their friends, come and we go, we play netball. I remember I always see those comments. But you would be going through that work. Anything you find challenging, you send me a question and says, teacher, even if I'm not there for a day, I will come go through those messages. And if I can, I will always give you the response. Therefore, you people read. Crossing over. Then we said we have another one we call crossing over. We said it occurs during phase 1 of meiosis. Then we said another one, we have what we call random and independent assortment, which occurs during phase 1 of meiosis. Yes. Then next we said random fertilization. Random fertilization. Therefore, this is science. Please, can we keep low? Our voice is low. These 2 things I have written here: mutation, crossing over, independent assortment, and random fertilization. Those are the 4 things which cause variations in people. I'm going to meet some of you. They're being reflected. Hello. Now we have a problem.
Yes.
We have a problem. People are putting me loud, and now the voice becomes reflected. Therefore, please avoid that. Now, after looking at these 4 things I was talking about: mutation, crossing over, random or independent assortment, and random fertilization, they are the ones which cause variation. Therefore, right now we had looked at crossing over and independent assortment, the 2, mutation and random fertilization. Now, these people made attempt to explain where variation arises. That is what makes their new, what they call new Downism. That's the only difference between it and that of Down, because for it was explaining. It explains how a variation comes across. Therefore, in this case, in simple terms, you can say new Downism states that new species are formed from pre-existing ones due to mutation, crossing over, independent assortment, random fertilization during reproduction, which cause variation on which natural selection acts. It means the only difference between their work and that of Down is only telling us how variation occurs. Because for him, Down, when you look at his theory, he states that for him, it starts directly on variation, that in a reproducing population, there is variation, whereby organisms which are better adapted are selected for, and those ones which are poorly adapted are selected against. They die. That is what will happen. Now, in this case, you talk about neodarwinism. For them, they just add in how variation comes, that their theory states that new species arise from pre-existing one due to mutation, crossing over, independent assortment, random fertilization, which causes variation upon which natural selection operates. Onto which natural selection operates. That is the modern theory of evolution. Anyone who has not understood what I'm talking about? Therefore, the new Darwinism was only trying to explain, because when you look at, for it solved the two problems. One, it explained how variation arises, and two, it explained how organisms become fit. They become fit through mutation, they become fit through mainly mutation and crossing over and very many other things which cause variation, which we looked at. Those are the two main limitations Darwin had. He failed to explain how fitness arises in organisms. He failed to explain how he failed to explain how variations arise, into which new Darwinism did. Therefore, futures of someone can tell you, okay, we shall look at that. We shall look at that. Have you understood that? The main cause of variation is mutation. Mutation causes variation mainly, and new characteristics are formed. And those organisms which have new characteristics, we call them mutants. And those ones which did not mutate, we call them non-mutants. We call them non-mutants. We call them non-mutants. Non-mutants. Therefore, we shall be using those words. I'm seeing some Okelo, yes?
Sir, please re-explain. I've not got you.
Explain what? Or you were off?
No.
What do you want me to explain?
About those mutations.
These mutations, you will not understand them for now, because it is a whole subtopic which we are going to look at at the end of genetics. But right now, you should know that there is mutation. Mutation is change in the genes. Genes change. Some are lost, we gain new genes. Some are substituted where we had a gene of normal blood clotting, we get a gene of hemophilic. Where we have a gene of non-sickle cell, we get for that of sickle cell. Someone becomes sickle cell instead. Therefore, mutations bring about variations. A species which was supposed to be like this becomes like this. Therefore, we shall look at that. Just know that there is mutation. One cause of variation is mutation. How many causes of variation have we seen? There are mainly 4: mutation, crossing over, random, that is what we call independent assortment, and random fertilization. They brought it last year, and it had 8 marks saying describe different causes of variation in a population. 1 was mutation, 2 crossing over, 3 independent assortment, and 4 random fertilization. Crossing over, we looked at it, that it occurs during prophase 1 of meiosis 1, where non-sister chromatids of homologous chromosomes exchange portions at the point we call chiasma, leading to formation of 4 non-identical haploid gametic cells. Some people may not even be remembering what is haploid. Nagire, do you remember what they call haploid?
Yeah, Janam.
Eh? Dan, do you remember even the chiasma? That is
Why not?
biology. Okay. Then we said independent assortment, which occurs during metaphase 1 of meiosis 1, where homologous chromosomes arrange themselves using their chiasma after crossing over on their equator, and it is done randomly, resulting into mixing of these genes. That is another thing. Mutation is the change in the structure of genes on a chromosome, leading to new combinations. We shall look at that. Random fertilization, here, the gametes, the male gametes and the female gametes fuse randomly. The female gamete has no choice that I will fuse with the other one because it has new genes, good genes. What comes first carries out the fertilization. Therefore, those are the causes of what variation. That is the new thing in new Downism. It explains how variations arise. It explains how variations arise within a population where evolution is going to take place by natural selection. Because we said evolution mainly takes place by natural selection. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Now, that is new Darwinism. Therefore, in this case, you can summarize that theory. You can summarize that theory. I'm putting some work of mine there. I don't know whether you're seeing it well. There's some theory at the base there. On UBC. Uganda cranes. Are you seeing that theory there? Are you seeing there? The
Yes,
new
sir.
Darwinism. It is the theory which states that new species of organisms are formed from pre-existing ones due to mutation, crossing over during prophase 1, independent assortment, mutation, and random fusion of gametes, which cause variation upon which natural selection acts. Therefore, we shall summarize it, but you need to know it. Are we together with that? Now, that is what we call new Darwinism. For it tried to solve the limitations of Darwin by explaining how variation arises. Now we go to natural selection. We are going to look at natural selection separately so that you understand what we call natural selection. Natural means environment, nature. Selection is a process whereby we sort out. Therefore, we first understand what is selection. We have said selection. What is selection? Selection is a process, or you can say it is evolutionary process. Evolutionary process. Evolutionary process. Evolutionary process. Where individuals with, or where individuals is an evolutionary process where individuals with better characters are selected to interbreed and pass on their genes to the next generation, while those ones with the poor characters are selected against Okay, that is what we call selection. When we say selecting, it is a process. Someone comes, selects. You have ever had UNEB selection process of UNEB? They call schools to select out people they think will perform best in their schools. It is a process. They even call it selection process. Even here, it is a process. But now here, we are not selecting out people who got first grades. We are selecting out people with better characteristics. And who is doing that? The environment. I don't know where he lives, but that is the environment doing it. Now, when it is the environment, we call it natural selection. But when there is no environment, we call it selection, the process. Have you understood what selection is? Therefore, selection is evolutionary process where individuals or organisms with favorable futures or characters survive to reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation, while those ones with unfavorable, or we say less adapted or unfit, all those words can be used, will fail to survive and die, hence get eliminated from the population. Like we can use the example of down he used of short-necked and long-necked giraffes. The short, because there was the environmental factor, and that was what will take place. Has everyone understood what we mean by selection?
Yes,
teacher.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what next? That is what we call selection. Now, how do we call? What brings? You people, let me ask. What selects out? We're saying selection is a process where selection is the process whereby we are saying selection is the process whereby individuals which with favorable characteristics are selected for, and they reproduce to pass on their character, their genes to the next generation, while those ones with unfavorable characteristics are selected against. That is what we call selection. But what carries out that selection? Who can guess? It is the
Mutation.
not mutation.
Environment.
It is the environment, environmental factors, environmental factors. And how do we call those environmental factors? Like, I can give you an example. Down said there were short giraffes, long giraffes, and we had those ones with short ones. These ones are short, these ones are long. When the drought came, all the short grass had to dry. It means these ones were selected against because they had unfavorable characteristics. These ones were selected for because they had better characteristics. They passed on their genes. Now, it means drought is the one which was the environment, what we call the environmental factor, which carried out selection. All together? Yes?
Yes.
Therefore, it is the environmental factors which carries out selection. Now, those environmental factors which carry out selection, you know how we call them? Selection pressure. Selection pressure. Therefore, whenever they talk about selection pressure, someone can ask you, what is meant by selection pressure? What is meant by selection pressure? When they talk about selection pressure, in simple terms, you will tell us that selection pressure is that what? Selection pressure is that environmental factor, is an environmental factor which determines the survival of an organism. Are we all together? Which determines who fit and who is not fit. Have you understood it? Therefore, now I have, before we have looked at the definition of natural selection, I have broken it. You have understood what is selection, that selection is the process, is evolution process in which organisms with favorable characteristics survive, reproduce, and pass on their characteristics to the next generation. While those ones with unfavorable characters are selected against. That is what we call selection. But we have what we call selection pressure, and we say selection pressure is an environmental factor which determines the survival of an organism, or which determines the fit and the unfit. That's what we call selection pressure. That's what we call selection pressure. We shall have these definitions more. Now I'm going through them so that you understand them. Questions and answers will come, and I will provide you with those questions when I have tried to answer them, and you do more research about them. Have you understood the selection pressure?
Yes, sir.
Pardon on what?
Yes.
Pardon on what?
Selection pressure.
We're saying pardon so that I use you as an example. Don't fear. Now he's quiet, an old man with a voice like mine. Eh? Who has not understood? Rise up your hand. Ignatius? Ignatius?
Yes.
I will not give you my indagire because now Ignatius, do you remember what, if you to understand the natural selection, let me give you an example of something we have already looked at. Do you remember what Down explained about the giraffes? Eh?
Yes.
He said that we had, according to him, according to his theory, we had short, long necked giraffe like this one I have drawn, and we have the short one like this, that one I have drawn. We had grass onto which they were feeding and some trees. Are we together? Are you following me?
Yes.
The short grass had to dry, and we only remained with the trees because whenever there is a drought, the short grass dries and we remain with the trees. What happens?
The short neck giraffe will die. Will be selected against.
It means these ones will die. Now, what has, and this one will survive because for it will still have food to